everyone, Timothy Ferris here with a few words about how to drive. That was the title of a book that was to have been written by Hunter S. Thompson, P.J. O'Rourke, and myself, but it never happened. Those two great friends of mine are both gone now, I'm sorry to say. Hunter had always maintained that he didn't want to live past the point in which he was no longer physically agile and able to take care of himself. And PJ wrote that he knew that if he gave up alcohol and smoking cigarettes, he could add perhaps 10 or 15 years to his life. But the trouble, he said, is that I'd have been adding them to the wrong end. The three of us were enthusiasts of driving high-performance cars and, in the case of Hunter and PJ, motorcycles as well. We'd all grown up in the 50s and 60s when fast, gorgeous cars and motorcycles were coming out every year with the promise of freedom, control of power, liberation, a promise on which they pretty much delivered if you took the trouble to be sure you knew what you were doing. I'm not sure what the book would have turned out to be like, but perhaps it would have contained some of what today are called life lessons. Things you learn having fun, doing things like playing golf or diving or driving. Lessons that can be perhaps applied to other areas of life as well. I often compare motorsport with playing the electric guitar. Both offered to young men such as ourselves the opportunity to control a lot of power and to do so with a great deal of freedom, underlying which was knowledge and expertise. The great blues man, the Reverend Gary Davis, once told me, I asked him what he thought about the electric guitar, which he didn't play. He said, "Oh, it's just a mess. You're not playing the guitar, you're playing the electricity." Excellent description of the electric guitar, and really what embodied the power that made it so popular to play and to listen to. Those two came together for me in a moment back about 1970 in the middle of Nebraska. I'd been hired to drive a 1954 Mercedes 220 Cabriolet from San Francisco, where it had been won by a man in the Marine Corps, had to go back on duty in the Philippines, to a family farm in New Jersey. Two prior drivers had been unable to get the car even out of the state of California, but I said I'd give it a try. I bought a case of good motor oil, put it in the trunk. Every time I stopped for gas, I'd top off the oil. The car also had a little pedal on the left that you pressed to lubricate the universal joints, the front suspension. I made ample use of that, and the car ran better with each state line across, moving from west to east. And a little after sunset, I was refueling the Mercedes at a rural gas station and could hear scraps of an electric guitar coming on the wind from off in the distance. Peering at the horizon, I could see like a dot, a football stadium. The gas station attendant, as he handed me my change, smiled and said just two words, "Sammy Hagar." And I got the whole picture. Sammy was over there in the stadium taking a solo, representing to young people a kind of freedom and power to which so many aspired, but able to do so only through the hard work and discipline he'd applied to learning how to control that power. The Mercedes was so beautiful that one of the perks of driving it across the country was you could park it just about anywhere without any fear of getting a ticket. It reminded me of what Miles Davis writes in his autobiography, that he had once left his Ferrari in the street in Harlem with the windows open and the keys in the ignition for a day or two. Nobody touched it. The sheer audacity and beauty of the thing sent the message that whoever had this car was not someone to be trifled with. So here quickly are 3 points that I might have made in that book had we ever gotten it written. First, to drive effectively, you want to stay cool and be smooth. I think that perhaps the main reason that I always was able to stay cool and be reasonably smooth in driving through decades of club races and testing high-performance cars on tracks and highways in the United States and Europe without ever having an accident or causing an accident, and managing even to prevent a few, had to do with the way my father taught me to drive. I was age 12 at the time. We had a 1954 Ford Coupe. Now, some people, when they want to teach a younger member of the family how to drive, don't stop to think it through. I heard about one young man who was going to teach his little sister how to drive, and since he started every drive by backing the car out of the driveway, he thought that's how his sister should begin her first lesson. That didn't go well. My father did the opposite. He took us to a housing project that was in the process of being built. The streets were down, but there was no one on them. And he put us at one end of a long, straight road, put me in the driver's seat, had me put my foot on the brake, put the car in drive, and then all he had me do was take my foot off the brake and let the car start slowly moving forward at idle speed of probably less than 5 miles an hour. And we kept it like that all the way down the road. The other end, I stopped, put the car in park. He got in the driver's seat, turned us around, put me back in the driver's seat. This time driving down, he let me apply a little bit of gas and a little bit of brake to see how things worked. And so it went step by step. So I was always comfortable. I was never frightened, and I stayed that way behind the wheel ever since. If you look at videos of great drivers, particularly in sports cars with manual shifts back in those days, when there's really a lot to do with your hands and feet, you'll see how calm they are even at the highest speeds in the most difficult circumstances. Many of them referred to the experience of being in a cockpit in a race as being at the office. That's being cool and smooth. Everybody makes mistakes. The trick is to correct them early so that small inputs will put things right, not to wait until you find yourself in an emergency situation where the inputs have to get bigger and bigger. You've seen videos of people crashing perfectly good, fast cars. The typical mistake is they don't realize they've done something wrong until too late. They overcorrect again, and the car is lost. My second point, be precise. Racing a car on a road course, that is not an oval, but a course where there are lots of turns and braking and speeding up and such, maybe a couple of straightaways, is a bit like playing golf. Each turn is like a hole in golf. Most of us can get a turn right, at least once in a while. That's like getting par or better on a golf hole. The main difference is that when you do that, you come out of that turn faster than if you'd messed it up. So the next turn comes up even quicker. It's kind of like playing golf where every time you got a birdie, you had to start running. I was on a racetrack one time with Hurley Haywood, the great Porsche driver, and I asked if he would drive my car on the track so that I could watch how he did it. This was at Thunderhill in California, a course where in those days there was a long sweeping downhill stretch going into a turn. On a bit of track like that, you're accelerating even faster than normal because you're going downhill, and you have to enter the turn. The car is going to drift to the outside, and to make the best time, you want that drift to stop just short of leaving the track. If I did that turn right, I would end up with my right rear tire about a foot from the edge of the tarmac, where if you hit that, you're going to go off sideways and have some unpleasant experiences. On the first lap, Hurley came through at high speed at that point, about a foot from the edge. I felt kind of pleased with myself. Hey, good turn for me was the same as this great driver's. But on the second lap, he was only maybe 4 fingers from the edge. That was a little closer than I'd ever managed to do it. Third lap, 1 finger gap, and it stayed that way with every succeeding gap. That precision and consistency is what wins races. It's also what wins in golf. One of the tantalizing things about golf is that we all hit great shots sometimes, but hitting 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 18 of them in a row is a whole different matter. Third point, look ahead in time and space. This is one thing in driving that has often been extended into a life lesson in the form of saying something like, don't look where you're afraid you'll end up. Look where you want to be. That's one reason professional drivers make those corrections so early. They're acting before they have to react. In 1997, last time I ever won a race, I was in a club race, and it was around the middle of the pack when it started to rain. My car was better suited to rain than most of them on the track, and I've personally always been happy driving in the rain. So I began to pass other cars. Pretty soon I was in third place. Ahead of me were 2 Porsche 911 turbos, seriously fast cars. I couldn't pass them, but I managed to remain close enough that they weren't out of sight. I could watch them, and my hope was that perhaps one of them would make a mistake as they were vying with each other that would let me through. And eventually that happened. One of the 2 turbos spun, took the other one out. I went through, and lo and behold, I was leading the race. The whole rest of the event, I was just out there, nobody else in sight, driving fast in the rain, and enjoying what ZZ Top called the wonderful feel of rolling in an automobile. Thanks for listening. See you next time.